In the dusty vaults beneath a ruined abbey in southern France, a set of ancient architectural drawings was discovered, etched not on parchment, but on human skin. The ink, blood mixed with crushed gemstones. The lines, so precise they defied the tools of the age. Historians first believed they'd uncovered a lost work of Gothic architecture, an early cathedral design. But then the patterns were analyzed, and everything changed. The shapes weren't just structural, they were symbolic. Esoteric. Some followed the golden ratio, others mimicked ancient Sumerian star maps. One diagram, when mirrored, matched the floor plan of a Mesopotamian ziggurat. Another? A near-perfect replication of the human brain's cross-section. And hidden in the margins, written in Latin and Greek, was a warning. To build this is to summon him. Within months, the researchers who handled the blueprints suffered violent breakdowns, visions, and sudden deaths. The church was silent, too silent. But records from the Inquisition told a different story. These were not blueprints. They were blueprints for ritual, for forbidden resurrection. And someone, centuries ago, tried to build it. And they might have succeeded. Now, let's begin at the beginning, with the monk who vanished inside his own cathedral. It began with a scream that echoed through a cathedral still under construction. The year was 1312. The location, a remote monastery in the Languedoc region of France, perched on a limestone cliffside near the village of Roquefixade. The air was thick with dust and incense as masons shaped blocks for what would become the central nave. Choirs practiced Gregorian chants beneath scaffolds. Then came the scream and silence. Brother Guillaume, a Benedictine monk and trained architect, had been overseeing the new design, an unorthodox floor plan he insisted had come to him in a dream. But by the time the other monks reached the site of the cry, Guillaume had vanished. His drawing tools lay scattered across the floor, his robe folded neatly beside them. The stone wall behind the altar was newly sealed with wet mortar, still drying. They searched for days, weeks. Some believed he had fled into the mountains. Others whispered darker theories. But something about that wall didn't feel right. Decades later, during renovations, it would be torn open. Behind it they found a cavity, small, like a tomb. Inside, no body, just a scroll, wrapped in cloth, soaked in something that smelled like iron. The ink had long faded, but a few symbols remained. Impossible geometry, spirals that bent inward infinitely. A depiction of a man, faceless, standing at the heart of a cathedral, arms outstretched. The arches above him were anatomically wrong. They twisted unnaturally, as if drawn from memory, but not a human one. The monks sealed the cavity again, quietly. The Inquisition had eyes everywhere in those years. And one whispered phrase was enough to burn you alive. Hidden architecture. Brother Guillaume wasn't just a monk. He was a visionary architect. And maybe more. A madman? A prophet? A vessel? His final commission, we now know, wasn't simply a church. It was something far older. A design meant to reshape space itself, to pull something through. Centuries later, historians found fragments of his drawings in strange places, within a burned library in Bohemia, beneath floor tiles in a Scottish chapel, carved into the teeth of a skull from Anatolia. All of them led back to the same geometry. And that geometry wasn't sacred. It was heresy, forbidden, the kind that can't be unlearned once seen. And once built, it cannot be undone. They called him Benedictus Mors, though his real name is lost to time. He was never ordained, never trained in any cathedral school, and yet his buildings rivaled the great basilicas of Europe. No one knew where he learned his craft. He simply appeared in Florence in the late 1290s, offering a set of blueprints so intricate and so alien that seasoned architects either fled in fear or tried to have him arrested. But then came the commissions. He didn't design houses or castles, only churches, and only those with patrons willing to ignore Rome. The nobles who hired him were often excommunicated or already flirting with heresy. They built in remote places, mountaintops, swamps, ravines, always somewhere the church could not easily reach. One such commission, rumored to be his first, came from the Count of Carcassonne, a man obsessed with housing divinity in stone. The chapel he wanted would never hold a congregation. There would be no pews, no pulpit, no altar, just a vast, empty nave shaped in the form of an 8-pointed star. Benedictus agreed, and what he delivered was no chapel, It was a machine disguised as a holy space. According to letters later confiscated by Inquisitors, the Count claimed that standing in its center for more than a few minutes made his skin crawl. He heard clicking, like clockwork gears turning behind the walls, though none existed. Candles refused to stay lit. Animals refused to enter. And at dawn, the light refracting through the stained glass did something unnatural. It cast a perfect human silhouette on the floor, arms raised in agony. That was the first known echo temple, structures that matched a hidden geometry now believed to be designed not for worship, but for invitation. And once again, the same name appeared in the foundation stone. Guillaume. It wasn't possible. Brother Guillaume had vanished nearly a decade before Benedictus rose to prominence. But now, historians suspect they may have been the same man, or at least two parts of the same design. Because Benedictus did not work alone. He traveled with a mute assistant, never named in any document, who carried his tools in a human femur hollowed out like a scroll case. Witnesses later said this assistant never aged. He appeared the same in records 40 years apart. When the Inquisition caught up with them in 1318, only the assistant was found. He was discovered inside the bell tower of an unfinished church in Navarra, still carving spirals into the stone with a rusted compass. His hands were blistered down to the bone. When interrogated, he refused to speak. But he did draw, with his own blood. What he drew was a cathedral, taller than any in Europe, its ceiling shaped like the inside of a skull. And its altar? A spiral staircase leading downward, into a mouth. The Inquisitors burned him alive the next day. His screams echoed for miles, they said. But something in those screams made men weep. Some said it sounded like a song. And the last thing found on his body was a copper pendant etched with two words in Latin. Forma prohibita. Forbidden design. It was only the beginning. The Vatican keeps secrets. But some are so dangerous, even the Vatican tries to forget them. Locked deep within the Archivum Secretum, sealed behind lead casings and papal curses, lies a book known only as Codex Demetrius. It is not bound in leather. Its pages are not paper, and it is not officially catalogued. In fact, no pope has publicly acknowledged its existence since the 15th century. Its covers are made of stretched human skin. Its binding is stitched with the hair of hanged heretics. And the ink? A mixture of ash, bile, and powdered lapis lazuli, so vibrant it glows faintly under candlelight. But what truly disturbed the few who've seen it were the drawings. Not words, not liturgy, not heretical scripture, but blueprints. Intricate, almost mechanical diagrams of structures that no sane architect would build. Staircases that loop inward endlessly. Chapels shaped like inverted crucifixes when viewed from above. Windows arranged to cast pentagonal shadows. And at the heart of it all, a dome, shaped exactly like a human eye. A perfect sphere, surrounded by angles that should not mathematically exist. One former Jesuit who viewed the Codex in 1712 went mad within the hour. He carved the diagrams into his chest using the edge of a chalice and bled to death in the library. His final words, "He waits where the light folds." The church tried to destroy the Codex. It was ordered burned under Pope Clement XI. But the fire failed. The book blackened, but would not burn. They buried it instead. But it was unearthed again in 1836 by Napoleon's treasure hunters in Rome. That time, it was missing 10 pages, ripped cleanly, surgically, as if with a blade of glass. Those missing pages later surfaced halfway across the world, in a Masonic vault beneath Washington, D.C. And this is where the story turns darker. Because among the symbols and patterns in the Codex are clear references to the human body. Not metaphor. Anatomy. One full page spread outlines the construction of a cathedral nave that matches the shape of the human spine, vertebra by vertebra. Another, a chapel chamber shaped like the interior of a human ear, complete with carved echo points for sound magnification. The implication? These buildings weren't made for prayer. They were made to mimic the body, to imitate life, to house something or someone. A ritual of architecture. A resurrection not through blood, but through geometry. And that theory gained terrifying traction when, in 1910, an anthropologist studying medieval remains in southern France uncovered a monk's skeleton with something embedded in his ribs, a rolled piece of vellum. It was one of the missing pages. and it showed the floor of summoning, an architectural design in the shape of a double helix, inscribed with words no scholar could translate. But when shown to a neuroscientist, he gasped. The pattern? It wasn't just decorative. It was a map of the brain's limbic system, drawn 600 years before its discovery. So who created this? And why? Was it sacred knowledge, or something far worse? One thing was certain. Every church that followed these blueprints, every echo temple, became cursed, sealed, demolished, or worse, converted into prisons, because what they housed refused to stay quiet. They call it sacred geometry, the idea that certain patterns hold divine meaning, that shapes can speak, that numbers can echo across centuries. But not all geometry is sacred. Some is older, some is not meant for us. In the scorched deserts of Cappadocia, Turkey, archaeologists in the early 1900s uncovered an underground temple carved into volcanic rock. At first, they believed it to be an early Christian refuge from Roman persecution. But the deeper they dug, the stranger it became. The walls were carved not with crosses or fish, but with fractals, repeating spiral patterns that grew increasingly complex as they descended. In the lowest chamber, they found a circle of stone seats surrounding a pit. The chamber's ceiling was shaped like a human skull, concave, echoing every breath like a whisper from the past. Etched above the entrance was a phrase in Proto-Indo-European script, so ancient it predates all written religion: build well. The soul is shape. That same phrase was found in the margins of the Codex Demetrius, and again in a monastery in Spain, painted in blood beneath a sealed vault. The implications were chilling. Across time and continents, disconnected cultures were repeating the same patterns, constructing the same impossible shapes, speaking the same forbidden language. But it wasn't until 1928 that a true breakthrough came. In Alexandria, a linguist named Dr. Elias Farouk uncovered a series of Coptic scrolls hidden inside a disused cistern. These scrolls, known as the Testament of the Angled Ones, contained symbols nearly identical to those in the Codex. But Farouk translated a key passage that still sends chills through the academic world. They came before sound. They shaped the light into homes. Their prayers were numbers. Their speech was in measurements. To remember them is to build. To build is to invite. Farouk disappeared 6 days after his findings were published. His apartment was ransacked. His scrolls burned. The only remaining fragment was a rubbing made by a graduate student who later died of sudden cardiac arrest at age 29. But the rubbing survived. On it, a drawing of a dome-shaped structure flanked by 6-pointed spires, the proportions matching the Fibonacci sequence perfectly. Underneath, the translation: the temple must be aligned with breath, bone, and blood. This language, it seemed, wasn't spoken. It was built. Every angle, every stone, every shadow cast by the rising sun. They weren't architectural flourishes. They were phrases, commands. Each temple was a sentence. And when complete, the building became a mouth to speak to something on the other side. The church, naturally, erased every trace it could find. It condemned scholars, burned books, closed sites, but even they could not erase what had already been spoken into the ground. And somewhere, beneath cathedrals we still visit today, those mouths still breathe. Quietly, patiently, awaiting the moment someone speaks their shape again. High atop the Pyrenees, perched like a wound upon the mountain, sits Montségur, the last fortress of the Cathars, burned to ash in 1244. Officially, it was the final stand of a Gnostic heresy. But beneath the ashes lies something far older than heresy. Something the Inquisition tried to bury, not out of piety, but out of terror. In 1996, a team of spelunkers exploring the cliffs beneath Montségur uncovered a narrow fissure leading to a forgotten crypt. No map recorded it. No historical account mentioned its existence. Yet there it was, a sealed stone vault deep inside the rock, locked with an iron gate etched in Latin, Ut tacitum manit. Let it remain silent. Inside, they found a small ossuary, bones of at least 7 individuals. But these were not simple burials. Each skeleton had been deliberately arranged, arms folded in unnatural angles, skulls cracked at the base as if trepanned, and one, disturbingly, missing a face. Not the bones. The entire front of the skull had been shaved smooth, as if dissolved. But what chilled the team most was what lay in the center. A stone altar, carved from black granite, its surface covered in symmetrical grooves. When photographed from above, those grooves formed a familiar pattern. A cathedral floor plan, one never built, but known from the Codex Demetrius. This was a negative temple, not one raised above the earth, but hollowed beneath it. A mirror version of sacred space, meant not for prayer, but containment. And buried beneath that altar, the team found a box. Inside, parchment scrolls wrapped in waxed cloth. The text was barely legible, but one passage stood out, written in blood-red ink. We built it backward. As they commanded, we built downward, and we heard him move. The hymn mentioned appeared in several other fragments, always capitalized, always spoken of with reverent dread. The Cathars had long been accused of believing in two gods, one of light, one of dark. But these texts revealed something deeper. They did not believe in two gods. They believed in one force, split by geometry, a presence that could only be accessed through correct construction. And Montsegur, it seemed, was not a fortress to protect the Cathars. It was a seal, a plug over something they believed should never be raised. And the Inquisition? They knew. One surviving inquisitorial record from 1252 references the mouth of the mountain and the echoing vault where prayers returned changed. It was ordered sealed, filled with lime, and erased from the papal records. The men who buried it were later executed, not for heresy, but for fear they might speak of what they saw. What did they see? The report only records one phrase from a dying priest who participated in the sealing. It had no eyes. But it saw me. The discovery of the vault was quickly suppressed in the late 1990s. Funding dried up. The cave entrance was collapsed. The original photos mysteriously vanished from the university archives. And two of the spelunkers died in what authorities called a freak climbing accident just months later. But not before one of them, Jules Martel, left behind a sketch in his personal journal. A spiral staircase, descending endlessly. At the bottom, a door. And scrawled beneath it, just one word: listening. In 1933, a mathematician named Dr. Adalbert Krell published a paper so disturbing that it was pulled from every academic journal within a month. Not because of its conclusions, but because of what happened to everyone who read it. The paper, titled Non-Euclidean Harmonics in Sacred Architectural Form, introduced a mathematical anomaly he claimed to have discovered while studying cathedral blueprints across Europe. But it wasn't just theory. Krell had traveled to dozens of cathedrals, entering each at dawn, charting light angles, echo patterns, airflow, and, most controversially, human brainwave response during silent meditation. And what he found was horrifying. Each cathedral designed using specific geometric ratios found in the Codex Demetrius and other forbidden blueprints, produced identical neural activity in test subjects. It didn't matter where the cathedral was or what year it was built. The same shapes triggered the same response. And that response, a sense of being watched. Even more chilling, when these ratios were replicated in a lab setting, using mirrors, light, and architectural mock-ups. Some participants reported visual hallucinations, but not random ones. They all described the same figure. Tall, faceless, standing just outside the mirrored angles. Watching. One woman clawed her own eyes out. A man began carving symbols into his skin with a paperclip. Dr. Krell himself vanished 6 months after publication. Only his shoes were found, placed neatly in the center of a pentagonal echo chamber he had constructed beneath his estate. His original paper was destroyed, but bootleg copies survived, and they began circulating in occult circles. That's when the mirror temples started appearing. In 1947, a derelict church was discovered in northern Romania. Every wall inside had been lined with polished obsidian, forming perfect reflective symmetry. There was no altar, no cross, only a hexagonal well in the floor, lined with crushed amethyst and bone dust. Etched around the well were mathematical notations, impossible equations that defied known geometry. Some described dimensions beyond the third. Others referenced prime number patterns so large they hadn't been computed yet. And one symbol matched perfectly the design found in Montsegur's crypt. But what tied it all together was this. These geometries were not human inventions. In 1961, NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab began testing structural designs based on ancient architectural proportions, specifically those tied to resonant frequency. One physicist, a man named Dr. Lionel Greaves, cross-referenced these patterns with radio telescope signals captured from deep space. He found a disturbing overlap, a faint pulse, a repeating numerical sequence embedded in cosmic background radiation. And when mapped spatially, it formed the same spiral pattern found in the codex. Not a message, a signature. Something out there, or something already here, was echoing the same architecture, the same language. A language made of shape, not sound. And it wasn't waiting to be heard. It was waiting to be built. Buildings as transmission towers, temples as speakers, chambers as mouths. But here's the true nightmare. These designs are still appearing today. Some in forgotten monasteries, some in high-end real estate commissioned by eccentric billionaires, and some in modern churches, exactly aligned with ley lines, exactly proportioned to echo the forbidden math, exactly capable of repeating the ritual. And somewhere, deep in a desert, stands an unfinished cathedral. Its windows reflect nothing. Its walls hum when you speak near them. And in its center, there's a spiral stairwell descending into the rock. No blueprints exist for it. No architect is named. And yet it stands, as if it built itself. In the dense woodlands of northern Italy, near the quiet ruins of the Abbazia di Vercani, a series of construction journals was found in 1984. They were buried beneath what remained of the abbey's choir pit, bound in waxed cloth, protected from fire and time. The journals belonged to the masons and artisans who built the abbey in the 14th century. But what they described was not the joy of creation or the beauty of devotion. They described madness. The abbey, now little more than stone rubble covered in moss, was once commissioned by a noble house known for its mysterious wealth and its sudden, violent disappearance from the historical record. Its blueprints, allegedly delivered by a cloaked figure who refused to speak, were unlike anything the stonemasons had ever seen. The layout was circular, recursive. The bell tower formed a triple spiral when viewed from above. Hallways narrowed unnaturally. The chapel had no windows. And then came the whispers. The first entries in the journals begin innocently, references to unusual echoes, to shadows that lingered too long. But within weeks, the tone changed. Workers began hearing voices, low murmurs that seemed to come from within the stones themselves. One mason wrote, "It speaks in measures. It counts my steps. It waits until I sleep." Several refused to return. One vanished entirely, his clothes found neatly folded beside the baptistry font. The font itself was cracked, shattered from within. By the third month, the project was plagued by accidents. A scaffold collapsed with no wind. A chisel exploded in a man's hand. But worse still were the dreams. Multiple entries described the same vision, a cathedral made of bone and mirrors, endless and shifting. In its center, a pulpit with no speaker, but a presence. Something towering, eyeless, its limbs too long, standing in the geometry of the church itself. One foreman went blind overnight, claiming he had seen the eye beneath the floor. Another carved a spiral onto the inside of his eyelid with a nail. And then, the chanting began. The choir had not yet been formed. No monks resided there. And yet, at dusk, voices would rise from the abbey, deep, dissonant hymns in a language none recognized. Latin scholars later tried to translate recorded phrases captured by field researchers in the 1970s. The closest approximation? The mouth opens when the stone breathes. We are the echo of its hunger. The final journal entry, written in shaky Latin by the lead architect, reads, "The design is not mine. I only followed. It grows without hands. It completes itself. The dome opened last night. The stars are wrong." Shortly after that, the abbey burned. No one knows how. No lightning, no torches. Just stone blackened from within, like it had ignited spontaneously. The fire melted crucifixes but left certain symbols untouched, spirals carved into the stone that glowed faintly even after the fire cooled. But the story doesn't end there. In 2011, a German architecture student named Mila Reinhardt visited the ruins. She brought drones and sonar equipment. What she found below the main sanctuary stunned the scientific community. A hollow space, geometrically perfect, untouched by the fire. Inside, 6 pillars arranged in the shape of a double tetrahedron, a shape known in theoretical physics to resonate with hyperspace models. And in the center, a sarcophagus, empty, carved with one word in 7 ancient scripts, return. Mila disappeared 1 week later. Her last known email, sent to her professor, contained only a photo, a church window, but the stained glass was wrong. It didn't depict saints or angels. It showed a man stepping through a cathedral wall, and behind him, through the breach, something watching. In 1624, in a quiet Bavarian town known then as Kirchenheim, a grand new cathedral was unveiled to thunderous acclaim. Funded by an anonymous patron and designed by a reclusive architect known only as S., the Church of St. Lumen was unlike anything else in Europe. Its facade gleamed white with polished limestone. Its spire rose impossibly high. Too high, some said, for the tools available at the time. There were no buttresses, no visible support beams. And inside, the symmetry was flawless, almost unnaturally so. Visitors described a sensation of weightlessness, as if stepping inside a dream or a trick of light. Every echo returned not once, but 3 times, at perfectly delayed intervals. The choir's harmonies seemed to circle the listener, surrounding them. Then came the opening mass. Over 300 townspeople gathered for the blessing. Witnesses from nearby villages recall the bells ringing louder than usual. But then nothing. No procession. No music. No celebratory cheers. Just silence. When investigators arrived hours later, the doors were sealed from the inside. They had to be broken open. What they found within remains one of the most chilling and least spoken of events in church history. Every person inside the cathedral was dead. But not by fire, nor sword, nor poison. They had simply stopped. No signs of struggle. No trauma. Every face was frozen in the same expression. Not fear, not peace, but blankness, as though something had emptied them. Even stranger, not a single body had fallen. Every congregant was still seated, upright, eyes wide open, pupils dilated. Even the infants. But the choir was gone. Their robes were found in a neat pile behind the altar. Their shoes lined up perfectly. No blood, no footprints, just one single handprint on the back wall, burnt into the stone as if from intense heat. And behind the altar, investigators discovered something else, a hidden chamber. Within it, a single object, a small stone cube, etched with spiraling patterns similar to those found in Montsegur and the Codex Demetrius. When touched, the cube emitted a hum, low, deep, and unsettling, a tone that some described as making their teeth vibrate. The church sealed the cathedral immediately. The incident was buried. Records altered. Survivors silenced. The town of Kirchenheim was absorbed into neighboring districts and quietly erased from maps by the mid-18th century. But in 1939, Nazi occult researchers under the Ahnenerbe rediscovered the site. They broke through the sealed entrance, filming their excavation. Those reels have since been lost, but notes from one officer, Hauptsturmführer Otto Weiss, survived in the archives of Berlin. He wrote, "This is not a temple. This is a machine, a perfect chamber of resonance. When we whispered, the walls answered. When we shouted, our voices vanished. And when we played the recording, just the choir's hymn, the stone cube cracked open. And I swear to God, we saw something rise from the altar. Not a shape, a shadow with edges, geometry with eyes." Weiss vanished 3 weeks later. Every member of the team died within a year. Today, the Church of St. Lumen no longer stands. Allied bombing in 1944 destroyed the visible structure. But locals claim that the foundation remains, buried beneath a modern shopping center. Strange things still happen there. Whispers in air ducts. Electronics failing. People freezing in place for minutes, unable to remember where they are. And some nights, they say the glass doors of the building fog over, not from heat, but from breath. Breath pressed against the inside. Paris, 1893, a city teetering on the edge of modernity and madness. The Eiffel Tower pierced the sky, electric lights hummed through the streets, and beneath it all, in the catacombs that stretched like veins under the cobblestone, a secret society began its most ambitious ritual. They called themselves Les Fils de l'Architecte, the Sons of the Architect, a strange blend of rogue Freemasons, excommunicated priests, and esoteric mathematicians. Their goal was not political, not spiritual. It was architectonic resurrection, to bring something back by building its body in stone. And they believed they had the blueprint to do it. It started when one of their members, a scholar named Etienne Marceau, unearthed a lost page of the Codex Demetrius during an estate auction outside Rouen. The page detailed something chilling: the ritual of return through sacrificial resonance. It wasn't a spell. It was a construction manual, a step-by-step guide to creating a structure designed not to house people, but to call down a presence, a being, one that could only pass through when geometry, blood, and sound aligned perfectly. By 1892, the Sons had secretly constructed their site, a mock cathedral hidden deep beneath Montmartre. They built with marble imported from Ephesus and stained glass windows salvaged from ruined churches across Europe. Every beam, every angle was precisely measured to match the forbidden ratios. And when it was finished, they performed the ritual. It began with the choir, 12 voices arranged in the echo chamber, chanting in tones matching the cube's vibrational frequency. Then came the sacrifice, a volunteer, or so the records say, placed in the center of the nave. But here's the twist: there was no blade. Instead, the structure itself did the killing. According to surviving fragments of Marceau's journal, as the chanting reached its peak, the very air began to fold. Pressure increased. Blood streamed from the volunteer's eyes, ears, nose. His bones cracked inward. Not crushed, reconfigured, as if reshaped by invisible geometry. And then, silence. For 1 full minute, nothing moved, not even dust. Then the walls began to sweat. Condensation poured from the stone. The temperature plummeted. Several observers reported feeling their teeth rattle and sink with a low hum, an unnatural frequency that seemed to come not from the walls, but from within themselves. And then they saw it. Not a being in the traditional sense. Not flesh, not spirit, but shape. A form made of mirrored angles. Shifting. Indescribable. It moved without movement, like a reflection twisting through broken glass. One witness later wrote, "It was not here, and yet it bent the space around us. When I blinked, it was closer. When I didn't, it was behind me." 7 of the 13 ritualists died that night. One clawed his own throat out. Another ran upward through the tunnels, screaming about the mouth inside the mouth, before collapsing of sudden organ failure. Marceau survived, but just barely. His final act was to collapse the underground structure with charges stolen from a nearby quarry. He left behind only one note, scrawled in blood across a torn blueprint. It worked. The sons of the architect were never heard from again. But in 1948, during post-war reconstruction, workers digging beneath Montmartre hit something unnatural. A sealed chamber filled with crushed stained glass and bones twisted into spiral shapes. The workers fled. The city ordered the site filled with concrete. But one man kept a shard from the stained glass as a souvenir. He died in his sleep that same night, bleeding from the eyes. His wife said his face looked peaceful, but stretched, as if smiling too wide. Today, rumors still swirl that descendants of the Sons continue their work in secret, that certain churches in modern Europe follow the forbidden blueprints, that some aren't churches at all, but machines waiting to be activated. And as surveillance technology improves, some churches have begun to hum, quietly, at the edges of human hearing. But dogs refuse to enter. Birds don't land on their roofs. And inside, late at night, some visitors claim to hear a voice echoing in the domes, not spoken, but formed in math. A question, a plea: build me again. In the outskirts of a quiet Scandinavian town stands the newest cathedral built in Europe, Church of the Silent Spiral. Its sleek glass walls and minimalist design seem to celebrate modernity and transparency. But beneath the polished veneer lies a secret no one dares speak aloud. Architects involved in the project vanished without explanation shortly after construction. Local workers complained of unexplained shadows and whispers carried on cold drafts. And parishioners report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread during services, an oppressive silence that clings like smoke. What makes this church different? Its floor plan, uncovered during an anonymous leak to independent researchers. The blueprints reveal a shocking truth. The layout is an almost perfect replication of the ancient forbidden geometries found in the Codex Demetrius and linked to the echo temples of the Middle Ages. The main sanctuary spirals inward endlessly, mirroring a double helix, with every angle aligned precisely to astronomical ley lines. More unsettling is what lurks beneath the foundation. Security footage leaked from the construction site shows workers uncovering a hidden chamber, long sealed beneath centuries of earth. Inside was a sarcophagus carved from black obsidian, covered in symbols matching the forma prohibita pendant once carried by Benedictus's assistant. The chamber was flooded with water from a nearby spring, water believed locally to have healing properties, but also rumored to be cursed. One engineer who entered the chamber refused to speak afterward, instead scratching spirals into every surface he could find. He disappeared the next day. Today, a shadowy organization rumored to be descendants of the sons of the architect oversees the church's operations. They deny any occult involvement, but keep the chamber locked and guard the blueprints zealously. Some claim this modern cathedral is not a house of worship, but a beacon, a call built to awaken what once slumbered beneath the earth. And as global seismic activity subtly increases around the site, scientists and mystics alike ask a chilling question. What happens when the geometry completes itself? What emerges from a temple built to speak beyond time and space? Is it salvation, damnation, or something else altogether? One thing is certain. The forbidden geometry has never left us. It waits, it watches, and it listens, waiting for the next builder. Conclusion: the echo of forbidden design from a vanished monk to shadowed architects, from lost crypts to modern cathedrals. This story reveals the terrifying power hidden in shapes and symbols. Ancient geometry not as art, but as a weapon. A language older than religion, older than humanity's first prayers, carved into stone to summon, to imprison, or to awaken. What we call architecture here is more than construction. It is a ritual, a code, a trap. The same patterns repeat across time and place, whispering of forces beyond comprehension, calling to minds fragile enough to hear, brave enough to build. And now, in our age of steel and glass, those patterns re-emerge, masked in modern design, hidden in sacred spaces. What will happen when the echo becomes a roar? When the geometry no longer hides, but opens? If this story unsettled you, if it stirred your mind and your fears, subscribe and join the conversation below. Share your thoughts, your theories, or your own encounters with the strange and the forbidden. And if you dare, watch our next story, where the line between madness and truth blurs beyond recognition. Remember, some designs are better left unbuilt, because what they build builds you too.